The key to being efficient when you're making rollover graphics in Photoshop is to make use of a feature called layer comps. Layer comps allow you to make multiple versions of multiple buttons, all in a single file, which will save you time and effort. I'm working in the web workspace. I'm starting this lesson with a navigation bar that has 4 simple buttons. If you don't have access to the exercise files for this course, I suggest that you make yourself a set of simple buttons like these so that you can follow along. The way that I made these was to select the rounded rectangle tool in the toolbox, drag out one button, and then duplicate that button layer 3 more times, moving the buttons apart. And then I added a bit of text with the horizontal type tool to each button. The first step in making these buttons into rollover graphics is to slice them so that each button will generate independent graphic files. In the Layers panel, I can see that each one of the buttons is on a separate layer. These happen to be shape layers. But regardless of what kind of layers they are, because each button is on a separate layer, I can use layer-based slicing. I'm going to select all 4 button layers by clicking on the topmost button layer and then holding the Shift key and clicking on the bottommost. Then I'll go up to the Layer menu and down to New Layer-Based Slices. And that creates a layer-based user slice around each one of the 4 buttons and some auto slices around them. The next step is to set up the way that I want each button to look in its normal or resting state. One quick way to do that is to apply a pre-built style to my buttons. I have my Styles panel open over here, which I opened from the Window menu at the top of the screen. The default style set didn't have any buttons that I liked, and so I went to the Panel menu and selected one of these other style sets that ship with Photoshop. I selected the Web Styles set, and then I clicked OK at the prompt, and that replaced the default styles with these web styles. I like these gel buttons, so I think I'm going to style the normal state of my buttons with a white gel. To do that, I'll check that all 4 button layers are still selected in the Layers panel, and then I'll just click on that white gel style in the Styles panel. The style is applied to all 4 buttons, and in the Layers panel, underneath each of the button layers, you can see this list of effects that makes up that white gel style. The effects are taking up a lot of space in the Layers panel, so I'm going to collapse them by clicking on the arrow to the right of each one of the button layers. And now I can see all of the layers in my Layers panel. Now I want to save the way that the buttons currently look as the normal state of the rollovers. This is where Layer Comps comes in. I've opened my Layer Comps panel here from the Window menu at the top of the screen, and then I dragged the Layer Comps panel by its tab over into the right-hand column, and I closed the rest of the Layer Comps panel group. That gives me more space to work here in the document window. I'm now going to make my first layer comp to memorize the way that the buttons currently look. To do that, I'll go to the bottom of the Layer Comps panel and I'll click the Add New Layer Comp button here. And I'll give this layer comp a name. I'll call this Normal. These 3 fields, visibility, position, and appearance, layer comps can memorize. Whether layers are visible or not, the position of layer content in a document window, and whether layers have a layer style, a blending mode, or an opacity change applied to them. In this case, appearance is the most important because this is the feature that I'm going to use to vary the appearance of my buttons. But I usually just check all 3 of these to be safe. And then I'll click OK, and that creates my first layer comp here in the Layer Comps panel. Now I'm going to go ahead and change the appearance of these buttons to make them the way I want them to look in the over state. I'll check that all 4 layers are still selected in the Layers panel, and then I'm going to go up to the Styles panel and I'm going to click on this style, which is a blue gel style with a drop shadow. You can see that the appearance of the buttons has changed, and also that those layer-based slices have expanded vertically to accommodate the drop shadows beneath the buttons. That's one of the advantages of layer-based slicing over manual slicing. Now I'm going to set up another layer comp to memorize the way the buttons look now as their appearance in the over rollover state. So I'll go back to the Layer Comps panel, and I'll click on the Add New Layer Comp button, and I'll name my new layer comp Over. I'll leave all 3 of these fields checked, and I'll click OK. And that creates the Over Layer Comp here in the Layer Comps panel. I can cycle through my layer comps by clicking the arrows at the bottom of the Layer Comps panel. This takes me back to the normal layer comp, and another click takes me back to the Over Layer Comp. Another way to view individual layer comps is just to click in the field to the left of the layer comp you want to see. These layer comps aren't set in stone. I can change my mind about the appearance of the button layers on either one of these layer comps, and then update the layer comp to reflect the change. So for example, let's say that I decide that I don't like the way the overstate looks. Instead of using the blue gel style with this drop shadow, I'd like to use a plain green gel style. So I'll make sure that I've selected my over layer comp, and then I'll double check that I still have my 4 button layers selected in the Layers panel, and then in the Styles panel, I'm going to click on the green gel style, and that restyles all 4 buttons. To update the over layer comp with that change, I'll go back to the Layer Comps panel, and I'm going to click these double curved arrows at the bottom of the Layer Comps panel to update the selected over style. And now when I cycle through the 2 styles, you can see that the over style has actually updated. So that's how to use the Layer Comps panel to create different looks for a set of rollover buttons in their normal state, their over state, and you could add some other states as well, like a down state or an out state. Now that I've created different versions of these graphics and memorized those as layer comps, the next step is to name and optimize the button slices, which is what I'll show you how to do in the next movie in this chapter.